The grand hall smelled of pine resin and expectation, a scent that clung to the back of my throat, like a promise I couldn't swallow. Candles flickered in iron sconces along stone walls that had witnessed 1,000 such ceremonies, their light casting shadows that danced across the faces of wolves who belonged. Wolves who had found their mates. Wolves who would never understand what it meant to stand at the edge of everything and feel the ground crumble beneath your feet. I pressed myself against the cold wall near the servants' entrance, my fingers clutching the rough fabric of my plain dress, the gray one that had seen too many washings. Its hem frayed from nights I'd spent walking the forest alone. My hair, pale as winter wheat, fell around my shoulders in waves I hadn't bothered to tame. What was the point? No one would look at me tonight. No one ever did. The mating ceremony was the most sacred night in our pack's calendar, when wolves of age would find their fated partners under the full moon's blessing. I'd attended 3 of these now, each one a fresh wound that never quite healed, each one a reminder that I was different. Broken, some whispered. Cursed, others said more loudly. An Omega without a mate was pitiable. An Omega rejected 3 times was a cautionary tale. My wolf stirred restlessly inside me, a creature of moonlight and sorrow, who had learned to curl small in the corners of my chest. She didn't howl anymore. We'd both learned that lesson. Did you hear? A voice carried from a cluster of she-wolves near the refreshment table, their heads bent together in that particular way women have when sharing delicious cruelty. The Alpha King himself is attending tonight. Can you imagine? Here, in our little pack, my heart stuttered. Alpha King Caspian Shadowmere, a name spoken in whispers and warnings, ruler of the Northern Territories, commander of 12 packs, a wolf so powerful that even alphas bowed their heads in his presence. I'd never seen him, but I'd heard the stories. Cold as winter's first frost, ruthless in battle, beautiful as a blade that could kill you before you felt the cut, and unmated, despite being nearly 30 winters old. They say he's looking for an Omega, another voice added, pitched low with significance, a strong one, to secure his bloodline. Imagine being chosen by him. I didn't need to imagine. I knew exactly what would happen if the Alpha King's gaze fell on me. The same thing that happened every time. That flicker of interest, then recognition, then the careful blankness that was somehow worse than disgust, because I was the Omega who couldn't shift properly. The one whose wolf was too weak, too small, too wrong. The one whose own packmates had rejected her bonds before they'd even formed. A commotion at the main entrance pulled everyone's attention. The massive oak doors swung open, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He entered like winter itself, tall and broad-shouldered, moving with a predator's grace that made my instincts scream both run and stay perfectly still. Dark hair swept back from a face carved from marble and moonlight, all sharp angles and harder edges. His eyes were silver gray, the color of storm clouds before lightning strikes. Alpha King Caspian Shadowmere had arrived, and every wolf in the room felt the weight of his dominance press against their skin like a physical thing. Our pack's alpha, Remus Thornfield, rushed forward with his Luna, both bowing deeply. Your Majesty, you honor us with your presence. Caspian's gaze swept the room with the efficiency of a man cataloging weapons and weaknesses. I'm here to observe your ceremony. My advisor suggested your pack has exceptional bloodlines. His voice was deep, resonant, each word precisely chosen. It raised goosebumps along my arms, despite the fire roaring in the hearth. I should have left then, should have slipped through the servant's door and disappeared into the night where I belonged. But my feet wouldn't move, and my wolf, my poor broken wolf, lifted her head for the first time in months, scenting something in the air that made her whine. No, oh no. Not this. Anything but this. The ceremony began with the traditional words, Alpha Remus, calling upon the moon goddess to bless the unions about to be formed. Pairs of wolves stepped forward, their bonds shimmering visible to those of us who could sense such things, golden threads of fate connecting chest to chest, soul to soul. I watched Marcus Riverstone claim beautiful Elena Grayson, saw her face light up with joy as their bond snapped into place, watched Thomas Ashford find his mate in shy Isabel Morningstar. Each union was met with cheers, with celebration, with the kind of belonging I'd only ever tasted in dreams. My chest ached with a loneliness so profound it felt like drowning on dry land. Then Alpha Remus called my name, Sarah Nightingale, Step forward. The room fell silent, not the reverent silence of anticipation, but the heavy quiet of morbid curiosity. I heard the whispers start immediately, rippling through the crowd like poison in water. Her again? Third time, isn't it? Poor thing. Though I suppose if your wolf is that defective. I forced my legs to move, forced myself to walk toward the center of the hall, where unmated wolves stood waiting. My hands trembled, but I kept my chin up. Whatever dignity I had left, I would hold on to it. 3 males stood in the unmated section. Owen Blackridge, who'd rejected me last year with barely concealed disgust. Finn Coldheart, who'd done the same the year before, and Garrett Stormwell, new to our pack, young and eager and already eyeing the prettier she-wolves. Please, I thought, not knowing if I was praying to the moon goddess who'd seemingly forgotten me, or just screaming into the void. Please, just this once. Alpha Remus began the ritual words. Is there any wolf here who feels the call of... I feel no bond. Garrett's voice cut through the ceremony like a knife. He didn't even look at me. The Omega is not my mate. Humiliation burned hot in my throat. Around me, I felt the weight of every eye, every pitying glance, every satisfied smirk from she-wolves, who were grateful not to be me. Very well. Alpha Remus's voice was tight with embarrassment. Not for me, but for the pack's reputation. Having such a defective Omega reflected poorly on everyone. The moon goddess works in mysterious... Wait, that single word, spoken in a voice of absolute command, froze every wolf in the room. Alpha King Caspian stepped forward, his silver eyes locked on me with an intensity that made my wolf whimper. He moved through the crowd like a blade through silk, wolves parting before him instinctively. The scent of him reached me first, pine and winter frost and something wild that had never been tamed. He stopped 3 feet away, studying me with the focus of a wolf deciding whether something was prey or threat. Your name, he said, though Alpha Remus had just spoken it. Sarah. My voice came out steadier than I expected. Sarah Nightingale. Show me your wolf. Horror cascaded through me. No, not here, not in front of everyone, not in front of him. Your Majesty, I don't think... Alpha Remus began. I didn't ask you. Those silver eyes never left my face. Show me. I could refuse. I had that right, even against an Alpha King, but something in his expression wasn't cruelty. It was curiosity, sharp and genuine. And perhaps it was time to stop hiding from what I was. I closed my eyes and reached for my wolf. The shift hurt, as it always did. Where others transformed in a seamless flow of power, mine was fractured, incomplete. My bones cracked and reformed awkwardly. My size was wrong, too small for a wolf, caught somewhere between forms. My fur came in patches of white and gold, beautiful but irregular. I was a half-shift, a broken thing, neither fully human nor properly wolf. Gasps echoed through the hall. Some wolves looked away, as if my existence pained them. Others stared with the fascination people have for accidents and tragedies. But Alpha King Caspian dropped to one knee before me. His hand reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away. When I couldn't, his fingers brushed through the fur at my neck. His touch was gentle, reverent even, completely at odds with everything I'd heard about him. Remarkable, he breathed. You're not broken, little wolf. You're something I've never seen before. My heart hammered against my ribs. His scent wrapped around me, and my wolf pressed into his touch like a flower turning toward the sun. Then his expression changed. Those silver eyes widened fractionally, his body going rigid. I watched something like shock, then wonder, then fierce possessiveness flash across his face in rapid succession. Oh gods. No, it couldn't be. Mate, he whispered, so quietly I barely heard it. But every wolf in the room heard the next words he spoke, his voice ringing with absolute authority. I, Caspian Shadowmere, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, claim this Omega as my mate and future queen. The hall erupted into chaos. The world tilted sideways, and for a moment, I thought I might actually faint, something I'd never done in my life. Not even during my worst rejections. But this wasn't rejection. This was the opposite of rejection. And somehow that was infinitely more terrifying. I shifted back to human form, the transformation leaving me breathless and trembling on the cold stone floor. Someone, a kind she-wolf I barely knew, draped a cloak around my shoulders before I could register my nakedness. The hall had descended into barely controlled pandemonium, voices rising in disbelief and outrage. "This cannot be." Alpha Remus's voice cut through the noise, his face flushed with an emotion I couldn't quite name. Fear, perhaps, or anger at losing control of his own ceremony. "Your Majesty, surely you're mistaken. This Omega has been tested 3 times, and no bond. Are you suggesting I don't know my own mate?" Caspian's voice dropped to a lethal quiet that was somehow more frightening than any shout. He hadn't moved from where he knelt, his silver eyes still fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin burn. "Are you questioning the moon goddess's wisdom?" No, of course not, but..." "Then we're done here." Caspian rose in one fluid motion, extending his hand toward me. "Come, Sarah. We have much to discuss." I stared at his hand like it was a snake that might bite. Every instinct screamed conflicting messages. My wolf wanted to take it, to press against him and never let go. My human mind remembered every rejection, every pitying look, every whispered insult. This had to be a mistake, or worse, a cruel joke. My voice cracked. I cleared my throat and tried again. "I don't understand. How can you be sure? What if you're wrong? What if this is just..." His expression softened, just a fraction, but enough that I saw something beneath the cold authority, something that looked almost like understanding. "I've waited 12 years past my first shift to find my mate, Sarah. 12 years of wondering if the moon goddess had simply forgotten me. Do you truly think I would mistake this feeling?" The raw honesty in his words hit me like a physical blow. He was unmated at nearly 30, not by choice, but by the same cruel fate that had left me alone. We were both the unwanted ones, just in different ways. I took his hand. His fingers closed around mine, warm and solid. And I felt it. The bond snapping into place like a tether I hadn't known was missing. Golden light flared between our palms, visible to everyone in the room. Undeniable proof of what we were to each other. Mate. The word echoed through my soul, in a voice that was both mine and not mine. Mine. Finally. Mine. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of all these wolves who had witnessed every humiliation I'd ever suffered. Caspian's thumb stroked across my knuckles, a gesture so gentle it nearly broke my composure entirely. "Come," he said again, softer this time. "Let's get you somewhere private." He led me through the crowd, his hand never leaving mine. Wolves parted before us in stunned silence. Some faces showed joy, others confusion, and more than a few displayed poorly concealed resentment. I caught Elena's expression as we passed. Her newly mated happiness dimmed by something that looked like pity. For me or for herself, I couldn't tell. We emerged into the cool night air, and I dragged in a breath that tasted of pine and freedom. The full moon hung heavy and silver in the sky, watching our drama unfold with celestial indifference. "Your Majesty, wait!" Alpha Remus's voice called from behind us. He'd followed us out, flanked by his beta, Jackson Iron Fist, and several other high-ranking wolves. "We must discuss protocols. The Omega belongs to this pack, and there are procedures for..." "She belongs to no one but herself." Caspian's words were ice. "And now, to me, you'll find that I care very little for procedures when it comes to my mate. But surely you'll allow us to prepare her properly. An Omega becoming queen requires education, refinement, time to..." "No." The single word hung in the air like a death sentence. Alpha Remus's face purpled, but he was smart enough not to push further. Jackson, however, stepped forward with the swagger of a man who'd never learned when to back down. "With respect, Your Majesty, this Omega is defective. Her wolf is malformed. Surely you deserve better than..." Caspian moved so fast I barely saw it. One moment he stood beside me, the next he had Jackson pinned against the stone wall of the hall. One hand wrapped around the beta's throat. The Alpha King's eyes had shifted to pure silver, his wolf rising to the surface with barely leashed violence. "Say one more word about my mate," Caspian growled, his voice layered with his wolf's deeper tones, "and I'll tear out your tongue and feed it to the crows. Am I understood?" Jackson could only manage a strangled nod. his face going from red to purple. Caspian held him there a moment longer before releasing him with a contemptuous shove. The beta collapsed to his knees, gasping. "We leave at dawn," Caspian announced to Alpha Remus, his voice returning to cold civility as if nothing had happened. "Have her belongings ready." Yes, Your Majesty." "Of course." Caspian turned back to me, and the violence drained from his expression so completely it was like watching a mask slip into place. "Do you have somewhere we can speak privately? Somewhere you feel safe?" The question surprised me. He was an Alpha King. He could command any space he wanted. But he was asking me, giving me the choice. A small gesture, perhaps, but it meant everything. "The garden," I whispered. "Behind the Omega quarters. No one goes there at night." He nodded, and gestured for me to lead the way. The garden was my sanctuary, a neglected corner of the pack grounds where wildflowers grew in chaotic beauty, and a small fountain burbled its endless song to no audience but me. I'd spent countless nights here, staring at the moon, and wondering what I'd done to deserve such loneliness. Now I stood in that same garden with a mate I'd never expected to have. And the irony wasn't lost on me. Caspian was quiet for a long moment, studying the overgrown rose bushes and tangled ivy with an expression I couldn't read. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and measured. "I won't force this bond on you." I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "What?" "The mate bond is sacred, but it should also be willing." He turned to face me fully, moonlight catching in his dark hair and turning his eyes to liquid silver. "I can feel what you're feeling through our connection, Sarah. Fear. Confusion. Distrust. You've been hurt, badly and repeatedly. I won't add to that by demanding you accept me simply because fate says we belong together." My chest tightened. "You're the Alpha King. You could just command me." I could. His lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "But what kind of mate would that make me? What kind of queen would you become if you were forced into the role?" He took a step closer, but stopped when he felt me tense. "I'm offering you a choice, little wolf. Come with me willingly. Give this bond a chance to grow naturally, or I'll have my guards escort you safely to neutral territory, with enough gold to start a new life anywhere you choose." I stared at him, searching for the lie, the trap, the cruelty hiding behind kind words. But all I found in his expression was sincerity, and a bone-deep exhaustion that mirrored my own. "Why?" The question escaped before I could stop it. "Why would you offer me that? You've waited 12 years for a mate. Why would you risk losing because a bond built on obligation isn't a bond at all?" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so unexpectedly human it made him seem less like an untouchable king, and more like a man carrying too much weight. I've seen what forced matings do to wolves. Seen the misery, the resentment, the slow death of everything that could have been beautiful. I won't do that to you, or to myself. Silence stretched between us, filled only by the fountain's gentle music and the distant sounds of the ceremony continuing inside. My wolf pressed against my consciousness, begging me to close the distance between us, to accept what we'd been given, but my human heart remembered every wound, every rejection, every moment of standing alone in crowds of paired wolves. "I'm broken," I whispered. "My wolf is wrong. I can't shift properly. I can't." "You're not broken." He said it with such conviction that I almost believed him. "You're rare. There's a difference." He paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. "I've traveled across 12 territories, Sarah. I've seen thousands of wolves, and I've never, not once, seen a partial shift like yours. Do you know what that suggests to me?" I shook my head mutely. "That you're not failed evolution. You're the next step. Something new. Something the wolf world isn't ready to understand yet." His eyes held mine with uncomfortable intensity. "The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes. If she gave you this form, this gift, then there's a reason. Even if we can't see it yet." Tears finally escaped, tracking hot down my cheeks. No one had ever spoken to me like this. No one had ever suggested my difference might be purpose rather than punishment. "I'm scared," I admitted, the words barely audible. "What if you're wrong? What if you wake up tomorrow and realize you made a mistake, that you're bound to someone who—" "Then I'll spend every day after proving to you that I didn't." He held out his hand again, palm up, an offering rather than a demand. "Come with me, Sarah. Not as my subject, but as my equal. Give me a chance to show you what having a true mate means. And if, after knowing me, you decide you want that escape route I offered, I'll honor it. You have my word as Alpha King." I looked at his hand, then at his face, then up at the moon that had witnessed all my lonely nights. This could be another rejection waiting to happen, another heartbreak in a long line of them. But it could also be the answer to every prayer I'd whispered into the darkness. My wolf made the decision for both of us. I placed my hand in his. Dawn arrived with the subtlety of an executioner's blade, swift, inevitable, and carrying the weight of irrevocable change. I'd spent the night in my small room in the Omega quarters, packing the few belongings that mattered: threadbare clothes, a handful of books, the pressed flowers I'd collected from my garden. Everything I owned fit into a single worn canvas bag. Everything I was leaving behind couldn't be measured in possessions. The knock on my door came precisely at sunrise. I opened it to find not Caspian, but a she-wolf I'd never seen before, tall and elegant, with auburn hair braided in an intricate pattern and eyes the color of amber. She wore the midnight blue uniform of the Royal Guard, a silver wolf insignia gleaming at her shoulder. "Sarah Nightingale?" Her voice was warm, professional. "I'm Captain Rhiannon Ashworth, head of His Majesty's personal guard. I've been assigned to escort you to the royal convoy." Yes. I'm ready." I hefted my pathetic bag, suddenly aware of how inadequate it looked. Rhiannon's expression softened with understanding. "Don't worry about belongings. You'll have everything you need at the Northern Palace. More than you need, probably." She stepped back, gesturing down the hallway. "Shall we?" The walk through the pack house felt like a funeral march. Wolves I'd known my entire life lined the corridors, watching in silence as I passed. Some faces showed genuine happiness. Old Martha from the kitchens wiped tears from her eyes, and young Timothy, another Omega who'd always been kind, gave me an encouraging nod. But most expressions ranged from shock to envy to barely concealed resentment. I held my head high and kept walking. Outside, the courtyard had been transformed into a staging area for the royal departure. 3 massive carriages stood waiting, their black lacquer gleaming in the early light, pulled by horses bred for endurance rather than beauty. Guards in midnight blue surrounded the convoy, at least 20 of them, all moving with the coordinated efficiency of soldiers who'd trained together for years. And there, speaking with Alpha Remus near the lead carriage, stood Caspian. He'd changed from his formal ceremony clothes into traveling attire, dark leather and reinforced fabric designed for both comfort and protection. His hair was tied back, revealing the sharp planes of his face. Even in the mundane task of departure preparations, he radiated authority that made every other wolf in the courtyard seem diminished by comparison. His head turned the moment I emerged from the pack house, as if some invisible thread connected us, and he'd felt the exact second I appeared. Our eyes met across the distance, and something warm unfurled in my chest. The bond, I realized, responding to proximity like a compass finding true north. He excused himself from Alpha Remus mid-sentence, and crossed the courtyard in long strides. "Good morning," he said quietly, his voice pitched for my ears alone. "Did you sleep?" "Not really." There was no point in lying. He could probably feel my exhaustion through the bond anyway. "You?" "No." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Too much to think about." He glanced at my bag, then at Rhiannon. "Captain, please ensure Sarah's belongings are stored safely." "Of course, Your Majesty." Rhiannon took the bag gently, as if it contained treasures rather than rags. "You'll ride with me," Caspian continued, offering his arm in a gesture both courtly and careful. "Unless you'd prefer your own space, I can arrange—" "No." The word came out faster than I intended. "I mean, with you is fine. Good, better." That almost smile grew a fraction warmer. "Good." Alpha Remus approached then, his Luna trailing behind him with her eyes downcast. The Alpha looked like he'd aged a decade overnight, the political implications of having his packmate, even a rejected Omega, claimed by the Alpha King, clearly weighing on him. "Your Majesty, I want to apologize again for any misunderstandings during the ceremony. We simply didn't recognize the signs of the mate bond, given the Omega's unique—" "Her name is Sarah," Caspian interrupted coldly, "and she's no longer your concern. Though I'd suggest you examine why 3 perfectly healthy males in your pack failed to recognize bonds that were apparently there all along." His eyes glinted with dangerous knowledge. Or perhaps you should investigate whether certain suppressants were slipped into food meant for unmated omegas. I've heard rumors of such practices in smaller packs, designed to keep valuable omegas from bonding outside pack lines. Alpha Remus's face went white. We would never... Of course not. Caspian's tone suggested he believed otherwise. Regardless, Sarah is under my protection now. Should anything unfortunate happen to any of her family or friends remaining in this pack, I'll take a very personal interest in investigating why. He let the threat hang in the air like a blade. Understood? Yes, Your Majesty. Completely understood. I watched this exchange in stunned silence, my mind reeling. Suppressants? Had my pack been drugging me to prevent bonds from forming? The possibility made too much sense, explaining why 3 ceremonies had passed without connection, why my wolf always felt so muted in the presence of potential mates. Rage built in my chest, hot and righteous, but Caspian's hand found the small of my back, a gentle pressure that grounded me. Later, his touch seemed to say. We'll deal with this later. The Luna stepped forward then, her eyes finally meeting mine. Regina Thornfield had never been cruel to me, but she'd never been kind either, just another wolf who'd learned to look through me rather than at me. Sarah, she said softly, pressing a small bundle into my hands. For the journey. Some food and... She hesitated. I'm sorry. For not seeing. For not protecting you better. The unexpected apology nearly undid me. I clutched the bundle and managed a nod, not trusting my voice. Within minutes, we were settled in the lead carriage, me tucked into soft cushions that probably cost more than everything I'd ever owned combined, Caspian sitting across from me with the ease of someone accustomed to luxury. 2 guards rode on the exterior, and I caught glimpses of Rhiannon on horseback, leading the convoy. As we rolled forward, I twisted to look back through the small window. The pack house grew smaller, the gathered wolves becoming indistinct shapes, and then the forest swallowed the view entirely. Everything I'd known was gone. Everything ahead was terrifyingly uncertain. Regrets already? Caspian's voice pulled my attention back. He watched me with those unsettling silver eyes, reading my expression too easily. Yes. No. I don't know. I sank back against the cushions. This doesn't feel real. Yesterday I was the pack reject. Today I'm supposedly going to be queen. How is that possible? The same way anything is possible, one choice at a time. He shifted, closing some of the distance between us, but still maintaining respectful space. You chose to take my hand last night. That was real. Everything else will follow from that choice, step by step. What if I'm terrible at being queen? Then you'll learn. He said it with such simple confidence, as if the idea of failure wasn't even worth considering. Do you think I was born knowing how to rule 12 territories? I made mistakes. Hundreds of them. I'm still making them. His expression turned wry. Case in point. I probably shouldn't have threatened your alpha in front of his entire pack. Diplomatic of me, that wasn't. A surprised laugh escaped me. He deserved it. They all did, if what you said about suppressants is true. It's true. His voice hardened. I'll have my investigators confirm it, but I'd stake my crown on it. The signs were there. Your wolf's unusual lethargy during the ceremony, the way your scent was muted until the bond formed. Someone was actively working to keep you unmated. But why? I'm nobody. Just a broken omega who... Stop. The command in his voice made me freeze. Stop calling yourself broken. You're my mate, which makes you the future queen of the Northern Territories. More than that, you're a wolf the moon goddess deemed worthy of standing beside an alpha king. Start seeing yourself the way she sees you, the way I see you. And how do you see me? The question came out barely above a whisper. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, bringing his face closer to mine. Close enough that I could see silver flecks in his irises, like stars trapped in storm clouds. I see strength that doesn't know itself yet. Kindness that survived cruelty. A wolf who kept her softness even when the world tried to harden her. His voice dropped lower, intimate. I see my mate, and she's extraordinary. Heat flooded my cheeks. I'd never been spoken to like this. With reverence instead of pity, admiration instead of disgust. It was overwhelming, intoxicating, and absolutely terrifying. I don't know how to be what you need, I admitted. Then we'll figure it out together. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and tucked a strand of pale hair behind my ear. His fingers lingered against my cheek, his touch feather light. "I don't need you to be perfect, Sarah. I just need you to be willing to try. Can you do that?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Good." He settled back, but his eyes never left my face. "Now, tell me about yourself. Real things, not what the pack thought of you. What do you love? What makes you happy?" The question caught me off guard. When was the last time anyone had asked what made me happy? I like the garden, growing things, watching flowers bloom even in poor soil. I warmed to the subject despite myself. And books. I used to sneak into the pack library after everyone was asleep and read anything I could find. History, mostly. Stories about the old packs before territories were established. A scholar Omega, his eyes lit with genuine interest. "The palace has a library that would make you weep. 3 floors, thousands of volumes, some dating back centuries. You'll have unrestricted access." "Really?" Hope sparked in my chest. "Really?" He smiled. A real smile this time, not the careful diplomatic expression he wore like armor. It transformed his face, making him look younger, almost boyish. What else? We talked for hours as the carriage rolled northward through changing landscapes. I learned that Caspian had lost his parents young, raised by advisors who'd prepared him for rule, but never for connection. That he loved thunderstorms and hated formal banquets. That he'd once spent an entire winter living as a lone wolf in the mountains, just to understand what solitude truly meant. In turn, I told him about my childhood, before the pack had decided I was defective. About my mother, who died when I was 12, and my father who drifted away afterward, unable to look at me without seeing his lost mate. About the garden I'd cultivated in secret, a place of beauty that was entirely mine. The miles passed, and with them, some of my fear dissolved. Caspian wasn't the cold king of rumors. He was complicated, damaged in his own ways, and trying just as hard as I was to make sense of a bond neither of us had expected. As afternoon sun slanted through the carriage windows, exhaustion finally caught up with me. My eyelids grew heavy, despite my best efforts to stay alert. "Sleep," Caspian said gently. "We have several more hours before we reach the northern palace. You're safe. Will you wake me before we arrive?" I mumbled, already drifting. "I want to see it. I promise." I let my eyes close, and just before sleep claimed me completely, I felt the softest touch, his hand covering mine where it rested on the cushion. The bond hummed contentedly between us, a golden thread growing stronger with every passing moment. For the first time in 3 years, I slept without nightmares. I woke to Caspian's gentle touch on my shoulder and the sound of his voice saying my name. For a disoriented moment, I thought I was still in my small room at the pack house, that everything had been a dream, conjured by loneliness and desperate hope. Then I opened my eyes and saw him, really saw him, in the golden light of late afternoon, his silver eyes soft with something I didn't dare name yet. And reality crashed back in a wave of equal parts terror and wonder. "We're almost there," he said quietly. "I thought you'd want to see." I sat up quickly, ignoring the way my body protested the sudden movement, and looked out the carriage window, my breath caught in my throat. The northern palace rose from the landscape like something out of the old stories. All white stone and soaring towers that seemed to pierce the sky itself. It was built into the mountainside, part of the natural rock face, as if the mountain had given birth to the structure, rather than human hands constructing it. Evening sun painted it in shades of gold and rose, making it glow like a jewel against the dark evergreen forest that surrounded it. "It's beautiful," I whispered, inadequate words for the awe tightening my chest. "It's home." Caspian's voice carried something I hadn't heard before, genuine affection, maybe even peace. "And now it's yours too." The carriage rolled through massive iron gates guarded by wolves in midnight blue, down a cobblestone drive lined with ancient trees, and finally stopped in a courtyard large enough to hold my entire former pack. Staff members appeared as if summoned by invisible signals, stable hands for the horses, servants for the luggage, guards taking up positions with practiced efficiency. Rhiannon opened our carriage door and offered her hand to help me down. "Welcome to the Northern Palace, my lady." My lady. The title felt like wearing someone else's skin. Caspian descended after me, immediately surrounded by what appeared to be advisors and officials. all speaking in urgent, overlapping voices about matters that clearly couldn't wait. He handled them with patient authority, but I caught the tension in his shoulders, the slight tightening around his eyes that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. Your Majesty, the Council is requesting an immediate audience. The trade delegations from the Western Territories have been waiting since there's been an incident at the southern border that requires your enough. Caspian's single word cut through the chaos. I've been gone less than 2 days. Everything can wait until morning. His eyes found mine across the crowd. Right now, I need to ensure my mate is settled properly. The word mate rippled through the gathered staff like a stone thrown into still water. I felt their stares, their shock, their rapid recalculation of palace politics now that an unknown Omega stood where a queen would soon be. A woman stepped forward from the crowd, older, perhaps 60, with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a severe bun and eyes sharp enough to cut glass. She wore elegant robes in deep burgundy and carried herself with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Your Majesty. She inclined her head with respect, but not subservience. I am Adelaide Winterbourne, head of the royal household. May I be the first to offer congratulations on your mating. Her gaze shifted to me, assessing and finding me lacking in some fundamental way I couldn't quite identify. My lady, I've prepared the Queen's suite for your use. If you'll follow me, I'll show you to your rooms and explain the protocols you'll need to. Actually, Caspian interrupted smoothly, I'll show Sarah to her rooms myself. You may provide a full briefing tomorrow, Adelaide. Tonight she needs rest and adjustment, not protocol lessons. Adelaide's lips thinned into a disapproving line, but she bowed. As you wish, Your Majesty. Though I must stress that there are certain expectations and standards that must be maintained, particularly with the lunar summit only 3 weeks away. Tomorrow, Adelaide. Of course. She swept away, taking most of the hovering officials with her through sheer force of will. Caspian offered me his arm. Shall we escape before someone else finds an urgent matter that absolutely cannot wait? I took his arm gratefully, letting him guide me through corridors that seemed designed to overwhelm. High ceilings painted with elaborate murals, floors of polished marble that reflected our images like dark mirrors, tapestries depicting battle scenes and crowned wolves. Everything spoke of power, legacy, centuries of rule. Everything made me feel like an imposter in borrowed clothes. Breathe, Caspian murmured as we climbed a grand staircase. I know it's overwhelming. The palace has that effect on everyone at first. Did it overwhelm you? Terrified me, actually. His admission surprised me. I was barely 18 when I took the crown, still half feral from grief over my parents. I spent the first month convinced I'd destroy everything they'd built. He glanced at me with a wry smile. I locked myself in the library for 3 days straight once, just to avoid a council meeting about grain taxation. The image of this powerful king hiding from bureaucrats made me smile despite my nerves. What happened? My head advisor at the time, a formidable she-wolf named Margaret who'd served my mother, broke down the library door with an axe and dragged me out by my ear. He laughed at the memory, the sound warm and genuine. She told me that leadership wasn't about knowing everything. It was about learning to ask the right questions and trusting the right people. Changed my entire perspective. We stopped before a set of double doors carved with intricate wolf designs, silver inlay catching the light from wall sconces. Caspian pushed them open, revealing rooms that made my former space look like a closet. The Queen's suite was vast, a sitting room with furniture that looked both comfortable and priceless. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking mountains and forest. A bedroom beyond with a bed large enough for 4 people. Everything was decorated in soft blues and silvers, elegant without being cold. Words failed me entirely. Too much? Caspian watched my reaction carefully. I can have you move to something smaller if you'd prefer. These are the traditional Queen's rooms, but tradition isn't... No, it's beautiful. It's just... I moved to the windows, pressing my palm against cool glass. The view stretched for miles, wilderness painted in evening shadows. I keep waiting to wake up, for this to be some cruel dream that will hurt even more when reality returns. I felt him approach before I heard him, the bond pulling taut between us like a string waiting to be plucked. He stopped just behind me, close enough that his warmth radiated against my back, but he didn't touch me. This is real, Sarah. His voice was low, intimate. I know trust has to be earned, especially after everything you've survived. But I'm here. This is happening. And I'm not going anywhere. I turned to face him, tilting my head back to meet his eyes. We were so close I could count his heartbeats through the bond, feel the restraint it cost him not to close the remaining distance between us. Why me? The question had been building all day, pressing against my ribs until I had to let it out. You're the Alpha King. You could have anyone. Someone trained for this. Someone whose wolf isn't wrong. Someone who wouldn't embarrass you in front of... He kissed me. It wasn't rough or demanding. It was gentle, almost reverent, his lips pressing against mine with the careful tenderness of someone handling something precious and fragile. One hand came up to cup my face, his thumb stroking my cheekbone, while the other settled at my waist, steadying me when my knees threatened to buckle. The bond exploded between us, golden light flooding my vision, pleasure and rightness, and home singing through every nerve. My wolf howled in joy, finally complete. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine, both of us breathing hard. That's why, he said roughly. Because when I touch you, the world makes sense for the first time in 30 years, because your soul calls to mine in a language I didn't know I was missing. Because the moon goddess doesn't make mistakes, even when we can't see her reasons. His eyes blazed with intensity that should have frightened me, but instead made me feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in my life. Your wolf isn't wrong, Sarah. She's exactly what mine has been waiting for. Tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them. Not tears of sadness, but of overwhelming relief. To be wanted, to be chosen, to be enough, exactly as I was. I'm scared, I whispered against his lips. I don't know how to be queen. I don't know how to be anyone's mate. What if I fail you? Then we'll fail together, and figure it out anyway. He kissed my forehead, my cheeks, the tip of my nose. Small, tender gestures that unmade me completely. I'm not asking you to be perfect, little wolf. I'm just asking you to stay, to try, to let me prove that you deserve everything I'm offering and more. A knock at the door interrupted us. Caspian growled low in his throat, an instinctive response to intrusion that made my wolf preen with satisfaction. He was territorial over me, protective, possessive in the way mates should be. Your Majesty? Rhiannon's voice came through the heavy wood. I apologize for the interruption, but there's been a development that requires your immediate attention. It concerns the southern border incident Adelaide mentioned. Caspian's jaw tightened with frustration, but he called back. I'll be right there. He turned to me, regret clear in his expression. I'm sorry. Duty calls, apparently with terrible timing. It's fine. I managed a smile that was almost convincing. You're the king. The kingdom needs you. The kingdom can wait 5 more minutes. He walked to a rope pull near the fireplace and tugged it. Within moments, a young woman appeared at the door, pretty, with kind eyes and a warm smile. Your Majesty? Mira, this is Sarah, my mate and your future queen. Would you help her with anything she needs tonight? Draw a bath, bring food, answer questions, whatever she requires. Mira's eyes went wide, but she recovered quickly, dropping into a curtsy. Of course, Your Majesty. It would be my honor. Caspian returned to me, catching my hand and pressing a kiss to my knuckles that sent shivers up my arm. I'll return as soon as I can. Lock the door if it makes you feel safer. These rooms are yours, and no one enters without your permission. Understood? I nodded, not trusting my voice. He hesitated at the door, looking back at me with an expression that was pure longing. Welcome home, Sarah. Then he was gone, and I was alone in rooms larger than any space I'd ever inhabited, with a servant who looked at me with curiosity rather than contempt in a palace that was somehow supposed to become home. Mira cleared her throat gently. My lady, would you like me to prepare a bath? You must be exhausted from traveling. Yes, please. And Mira? I waited until she met my eyes. You don't have to call me my lady. Sarah is fine. Her smile brightened. As you wish, my Sarah. She moved toward what I assumed was the bathing room, then paused. May I say something? Of course. We're all very happy for His Majesty. He's been alone for so long, carrying everything by himself. It's good to see him smile again. She ducked her head shyly, and I think you'll be a wonderful queen. Anyone who can make him look that happy already is. The words warmed something in my chest that had been cold for far too long. Maybe, just maybe, I could do this. Maybe I could become the person Caspian seemed to think I already was. Through the windows, night settled over the mountains like a velvet cloak, and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Somewhere in this vast palace, my mate dealt with threats and politics and the weight of 12 territories. And here, in rooms that still felt borrowed, I began the slow process of believing I might actually deserve to stay. 3 weeks passed in a blur of lessons, protocol training, and stolen moments with Caspian that made my heart race and my wolf purr with contentment. Adelaide proved to be a demanding but surprisingly patient teacher, drilling me on court etiquette, territorial politics, and the intricate dance of ruling beside an alpha king. Mira became more friend than servant, helping me navigate the complex social hierarchy of palace life with humor and grace. But it was the nights I treasured most. When Caspian would escape his duties and find me in the library or the gardens, and we'd talk until dawn threatened the horizon. He courted me properly, this powerful king, bringing me flowers from the mountain slopes and books he thought I'd enjoy, asking about my day and actually listening to the answers. The bond between us grew stronger with each passing hour, golden and warm and right in ways I'd never imagined possible. Then the lunar summit arrived, and with it, every alpha and high-ranking wolf from all 12 territories. I stood before the mirror in my rooms, barely recognizing the woman staring back. The gown Adelaide had commissioned was masterful. Midnight blue silk that flowed like water, silver embroidery at the bodice catching light with every breath, designed to complement Caspian's formal attire. My pale hair had been styled in an elaborate arrangement of braids and waves, a silver circlet resting against my forehead. I looked like a queen. I felt like an imposter in costume jewelry. "You're beautiful," Mira said softly, adjusting a final pin. "His Majesty won't be able to take his eyes off you." "I'm terrified," I admitted. "All those alphas, all their lunas, everyone watching, judging whether I'm worthy to—" "You are worthy," Caspian's voice came from the doorway. Mira had left it cracked, and he'd entered silently, as was his habit. "May I have a moment alone with my mate?" Mira curtsied and slipped out, closing the door behind her. Caspian crossed the room with predatory grace, magnificent in formal black with silver accents. His hair swept back to reveal the strong lines of his face, but it was his eyes that held me, storm silver and blazing with an intensity that made my breath catch. "You're stunning," he said, his voice rough with an emotion that made my skin flush. "Though you could wear rags and still outshine every wolf in that hall, you're biased." "Completely." He smiled, then sobered, reaching out to take my trembling hands. "Sarah, listen to me. Tonight will be difficult. Some of those alphas will question my choice. Some will see your unique wolf as weakness rather than strength. There will be whispers, challenges to your position, maybe even outright insults." My stomach twisted with dread. "You're really selling this." His grip tightened. "I need you to understand what you're walking into. But I also need you to know that I will be beside you every moment. Anyone who disrespects you disrespects me, and I won't tolerate it." His eyes flashed with his wolf's presence. "You are my mate, my chosen queen. And if anyone has a problem with that, they can challenge me directly." The fierce protectiveness in his voice steadied something inside me. "What if I embarrass you? What if I say the wrong thing, or—" "Then we'll handle it together." He lifted my hands to his lips, kissing each knuckle with deliberate care. "You're stronger than you know, little wolf. Trust yourself. Trust our bond. And remember that half those alphas are more afraid of you than you are of them." "Why would they be afraid of me?" "Because you're something new, something they can't categorize or control. And because you hold the heart of the most powerful alpha in the territories." His smile turned predatory. "That makes you very dangerous indeed." A knock sounded. Rhiannon, announcing it was time. Caspian offered his arm. "Ready?" I took a deep breath, let it out slowly and nodded, as I'll ever be. The great hall had been transformed for the summit. Hundreds of candles casting dancing shadows, long tables laden with food and drink, banners representing all 12 territories hanging from the vaulted ceiling. And wolves. So many wolves, all of them powerful, all of them turning to stare as the massive doors opened, and Caspian led me inside. The room fell silent, except for the crackle of fires in twin hearths. Lords and ladies of the Northern Territories. Caspian's voice rang out with absolute authority. "I present to you Sarah Nightingale, my mate and your future queen." The silence stretched for 1 heartbeat, 2, 3, and then Rhiannon began to applaud. Her guards joined her, then others, until the hall filled with applause that sounded almost genuine. But I felt the undercurrents, saw the skeptical looks, the barely concealed sneers, the whispered conversations behind raised hands. The evening proceeded with agonizing formality. I sat beside Caspian at the high table, feeling exposed and evaluated. Adelaide had prepared me for the basics: which fork to use, how to respond to toasts, the proper way to acknowledge each alpha as they came to pay respects. Most were carefully polite. A few were genuinely warm, particularly Alpha Donovan Stormcrest of the Eastern Mountains, whose own mate had been an Omega from humble origins. But others made their disdain clear in subtle ways. The Western Alpha, Gregory Ironhide, who barely glanced at me while speaking to Caspian about maintaining bloodline purity. Luna Helena Shadowfin, who looked me up and down like I was livestock being evaluated for purchase, then whispered something to her neighbor that made them both smirk. I endured it with my head high and my hands steady, the way Caspian had taught me. But inside, my wolf snarled, and my human heart ached with the familiar pain of not being enough. Then disaster struck in the form of Alpha Darius Blackthorn from the Southern Territories. He approached during the dancing portion of the evening, when Caspian had been pulled aside by advisors discussing border disputes. Darius was massive even for an alpha, easily 6.5 feet of solid muscle, with a scarred face and eyes like chips of ice. "So you're the defective Omega who caught our king's eye." His voice carried, intentionally loud enough for nearby wolves to hear. "Tell me, what tricks did you use? Some kind of enchantment, perhaps? Because I find it hard to believe." "Careful, Darius." Rhiannon appeared at my side, her hand resting casually on her sword hilt. "You're addressing the future queen. I'm addressing an Omega who can't even shift properly." He leaned closer, his breath reeking of wine and malice. "We all saw the reports from your former pack. A half-shift abomination who was rejected 3 times. What kind of heir could you possibly produce for our king? What kind of example does this set for—" "That's enough." My voice cut through his tirade, surprising even myself with its steadiness. I stood, drawing myself to my full height, even though I barely reached his shoulder. "You want to know what kind of example this sets, Alpha Darius?" He blinked, clearly not expecting me to respond. "It sets the example that the moon goddess's choices matter more than our prejudices, that strength comes in forms we don't always recognize, that a wolf's worth isn't determined by how perfectly they fit our expectations." I felt Caspian's attention snap to me from across the room, felt his pride and fierce protectiveness flood through the bond. "My wolf may not look like yours, but she gave me this form for a reason." And the Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in all territories, recognized that reason even when others couldn't. "Pretty words," Darius sneered, "but words don't make a queen. Power does, strength does, and you have neither." "She has both." Caspian's voice was arctic cold, his presence suddenly overwhelming as he appeared beside me. The temperature in the immediate area seemed to drop 10 degrees. "She has the strength to survive rejection and cruelty, and still choose kindness. The power to stand before wolves like you and refuse to be diminished. And most importantly, she has me." His eyes flashed pure silver. "So I'll ask you once, Darius, do you wish to continue insulting my mate, or would you prefer to keep your tongue and your position as alpha?" Darius's face went pale. Around us, every wolf had stopped what they were doing to watch the confrontation. The challenge hung in the air like drawn steel. Darius swallowed hard. "I apologize, Your Majesty." "And to you, my lady." I spoke out of turn. "You spoke out of ignorance and cruelty," Caspian corrected coldly. "But you'll have a chance to learn better. In fact, I think a demonstration is in order." He raised his voice, addressing the entire hall. "Many of you share Darius's doubts about my mate. You question her strength, her worthiness, her ability to be queen, so let me show you something you've never seen before." He turned to me, his expression softening. "Sarah, would you shift for them? Not because you have to prove anything, but because I want them to see what I see. What the moon goddess created." Fear spiked through me. "Caspian, I don't know if—" "Trust me, trust yourself, trust our bond." His hand found mine, squeezed gently. Show them your truth, little wolf. I closed my eyes, reached for my wolf, and let the shift take me. It hurt less this time, perhaps because I wasn't fighting it, wasn't ashamed of what I was becoming. My bones reformed, my size shifting to that in-between state that was neither human nor full wolf. My fur emerged in patterns of white and gold, catching the candlelight like captured moonbeams. Gasps echoed through the hall. I opened my eyes, sharper in this form, seeing colors humans couldn't perceive, and looked at the assembled wolves. No pity in my gaze now. No shame. Just calm acceptance of what I was. Caspian knelt beside me, one hand gentle in my fur. "This is my mate," he said clearly. "A wolf, the moon goddess, blessed with a form none of us have seen before. A bridge between human and wolf, capable of things we don't yet understand. And she is mine." His eyes swept the crowd with clear warning. "Anyone who challenges her challenges me. Anyone who disrespects her answers to me. Is that understood?" The hall erupted in a chorus of, "Yes, Your Majesty," some more enthusiastic than others, but all compliant. I shifted back to human form, and immediately Caspian wrapped me in his jacket, shielding me until Mira rushed forward with a robe. My legs shook with exhaustion, but Caspian's arm around my waist kept me upright. "I think we've had enough politics for one evening," Caspian announced. "The summit continues tomorrow. Tonight I'm taking my mate somewhere she can breathe without being scrutinized by wolves who should know better." He swept me from the hall before anyone could protest, Rhiannon and her guards forming a protective escort. We didn't stop until we reached the palace gardens, the wild section at the back, where cultivated beauty gave way to natural forest. The moment we were alone, Caspian pulled me into his arms, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. "I'm sorry," he said roughly. "I'm so sorry you had to endure that. I should have anticipated Darius would—" "Stop." I pulled back enough to see his face. "I'm not sorry. Yes, it was awful, but you were right. I needed to face them. To show them I won't hide." A shaky laugh escaped me, even if I was terrified the entire time. "You were magnificent." His hand cupped my face, thumb stroking my cheekbone. "You stood before an alpha twice your size and refused to back down. You showed them your wolf without apology. You were everything a queen should be. I had you beside me. That made all the difference. You'll always have me beside you." The words were a vow, sealed with a kiss that tasted of promise and forever. "For as long as we both live, little wolf. You're not alone anymore." Tears pricked my eyes, but these were the good kind, the kind that came from overwhelming joy rather than pain. "I love you," I whispered against his lips. "I don't know when it happened, but I do. I love you." His eyes blazed with emotion so intense it stole my breath. "I've loved you since the moment you took my hand in that garden and chose to trust me despite every reason not to." He kissed me again, deeper this time, pouring everything he felt through the bond until I was drowning in sensation and rightness and home. "You're my mate, my queen, my everything." We stayed there in the garden until the moon reached its apex, talking and kissing and planning a future that no longer seemed terrifying but filled with possibility. Caspian told me about his vision for the territories, a place where wolves like me weren't feared but celebrated, where strength was measured in compassion as much as power. And I told him my own dreams, of a library open to all wolves regardless of rank, of gardens where anyone could find peace, of a kingdom where being different wasn't a curse but a gift. Together, we built a vision of tomorrow that made today's challenges feel worthwhile. The days following the summit brought changes. Some alphas requested private audiences to apologize, others to genuinely get to know me. Alpha Donovan became an unexpected ally, his Luna teaching me tricks for handling difficult court politics. Even Adelaide softened, admitting that I'd handled Darius better than she'd expected. Rhiannon became not just my guard, but my friend, teaching me self-defense and sharing stories of her own journey from soldier to captain. But the most important change was internal. I stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Caspian to realize he'd made a mistake. The bond between us grew so strong that I could feel his presence even when he was in different parts of the palace, could sense his emotions as clearly as my own. 1 month after the summit, Caspian officially crowned me queen before all 12 territories. I wore a gown of silver and white, a crown of moonstone and diamonds settling onto my pale hair, with a weight that felt right rather than burdensome. And when I looked out at the assembled wolves, some still skeptical, others genuinely supportive. I didn't see rejection waiting to happen. I saw a future I would help shape, one choice at a time. That night, alone in the rooms that now truly felt like home, Caspian pulled me close and whispered, "Any regrets, my queen?" I thought about the girl I'd been, invisible, rejected, convinced she was broken. Then I looked at the woman I'd become, chosen, loved, learning to see her differences as strength rather than weakness. "Not a single one," I answered honestly. "This is exactly where I'm supposed to be. With me. With you." He kissed me then, and the bond sang between us like a promise kept, like hope realized, like a future so bright it almost hurt to look at directly. I'd been rejected 3 times, yes. But the 4th time, the one that mattered, I'd been chosen by the one wolf who saw my truth and loved it, who saw my brokenness and called it beautiful, who saw my difference and named it divine, and together, we would build a kingdom where wolves like me, wolves who didn't fit the mold, would know they belonged. Because sometimes the greatest strength comes not from fitting in, but from finally accepting that standing out is exactly what makes you extraordinary. The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes. And I was finally learning to believe that truth included me.